Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are excited about this presentation today, Reclaiming the Fire, 6 Keys to Making Our Faith Formation More Evangelizing Catechesis. Not only is this a great topic, it is being presented by one of my most favorite people in the whole world, Joe Paprocki, who serves as the National Consultant for Faith Formation for Loyola Press. He is so talented and engaging, so I am thrilled to have you here with us, Joe. Thank you so much for being a part of Forefront.
Thank you, Andrea, and back at you for those very kind words. I've had the pleasure of getting to know Andrea these past few years. I've known who she was for many years, but we kept on our paths kept crossing as we traveled across the country. And finally, one day I said, I'm going to just stop and introduce myself. And so we both knew who we were, but we never had a chance till it was about 3 years ago, I think we finally got to know each other. So thanks for all the work you're doing with this conference and with the Procedo Project.
Absolutely. Well, with no further ado, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me during this time. I'd like to thank once again all the folks at the Procedo Project for this invitation and this opportunity and for this wonderful conference. I'd also like to thank the folks at Loyola Press, where I serve as the National Consultant for Faith Formation. This coming May, I'll be celebrating my 19th anniversary there, and so it's a wonderful place. It's a Jesuit ministry, not-for-profit ministry, and I'm happy to continue on in the tradition of St. Ignatius of Loyola, trying to help people find God in all things. And this session that we're going to be talking about is Reclaiming the Fire, 6 Keys to Making Our Faith Formation More Evangelizing, a More Evangelizing Catechesis. And so I want to be sure that you understand that catechesis is, when we talk about catechist and catechesis, we're not just talking about religious education programs. Every Catholic school teacher who teaches religion is a catechist. And that's so important to know. Sometimes if I've talked to Catholic school teachers and I refer to them as catechists, and they'll say, no, I'm not a catechist, I'm a religion teacher. I think there's a misunderstanding there. We think of a catechist as just a volunteer. A catechist is a church term. It is a term referring to anyone who is passing on the Catholic faith in a formal setting. And that's what a Catholic school teacher does. You are a catechist. It's actually an honor to be referred to as a catechist. It's not suggesting that you're not professional. It's suggesting that you have an official role in the church. And so I'm speaking to catechists today, whether you are a parish religious education catechist or you are a Catholic school religion teacher. So the title, Reclaiming the Fire, I borrowed this from a friend of mine, Julianne Stans. She wrote a wonderful book a year or two ago called Start with Jesus. And she says very bluntly in that book, she says, too often our approach to our faith lacks the fire or energy that it deserves. And then she issues a call for us to reclaim that fire. And so that's my goal in pretty much everything that I do, is to set the world on fire. That's another Ignatian phrase. St. Ignatius encouraged his followers to go out and to set the world on fire. As someone who grew up working in a family pharmacy, and my dad, my grandfather, several uncles, and several of my brothers being pharmacists, I like to use the phrase, I'd like to give the world heartburn, since I'm more familiar with that notion of heartburn and heartburn medications and so on. But we need to give people the kind of heartburn that the 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus had. Remember when they were with the risen Christ, didn't recognize him? But when Christ was speaking, and especially speaking about Scripture to them, later on they said, "Were not our hearts burning within us?" And so that's always my goal. I hope that's always your goal, to give people heartburn, the good kind that we don't want to get rid of, and to really help people to feel like their heart is on fire. And so that's our goal for today. I want to jump right into this and get you thinking about whether or not you have seen these faces in front of you before. I know I have. In pretty much any faith formation setting, we sometimes see these faces, and it really is a letdown for us, right? When we're so excited about talking about our faith and passing on our belief in Jesus. And yes, Andrea says sometimes they're even adults. I have done parent meetings, first communion meetings, where the parents sit and kind of give me the stone face, like, okay, when is this going to be done? What I'd like you to do, everyone who's with us right now, is look at those thought bubbles and type in the chat. How would you fill in some of those bubbles? What are some of the things that young people or adults in a faith formation setting might be thinking with a look on their face, like the one that you see there? So go ahead and type in the chat any thoughts that you have about what might be in those thought bubbles. I know a lot of times I hear people responding saying, "Oh, I'm bored." Andrew says, "Can I check my phone? What does this have to do with my life? Why do I have to be here? I'm only here because my parents made me be here." Maria says, "I'm hungry." That's great. There's all kind of reasons why people. Joellen says, "What does this have to do with me?" Exactly. And that's our challenge, is we have to face all of that. Megan says, "When am I ever going to use this in my life?" Sherry says, "This is boring." Catherine, "How much longer will the teacher talk?" Thank you. Keep going. I'm not going to be able to read them all, but you can gander at those as we continue on. So that's our job, is to deal with this. And I would like to get to the bottom of it. When I speak with catechists, people who teach religion, I said, there's really a process of elimination for us to figure out what causes this disengagement in front of us. And I ask 3 questions. And when I do this live, I tell my audience, and I want you to know that the answer to the first 2 questions is a resounding no. And I ask them to shout no to the first 2 questions. So when I say, is it the message that's boring? That they all shout, no, of course not. The message of Jesus Christ is not boring. And so we can't blame it on the message. The next one I'll ask, is it the messenger that's boring? And they all shout no, but it's interesting. There's always a little hesitation too. And I always have to say, oh, hang on a minute, folks. Some of you hesitated, because we sometimes blame ourselves. We sometimes think that we are boring. And we ourselves are not boring. There's no such thing as a boring human being. But that brings us to the third question. Could it be the method that we are using? And that is where I put all my chips. Even the most exciting person, if they don't have good methodology, you're going to end up with those faces and those thought bubbles that we saw there. And so I choose a picture for this slide of a class. I don't know that it's a religion class, but it is a school class from probably the very early 1900s or so. Teachers got the textbook, students sitting at their desks, and they are reading from a textbook, and that's pretty much all that's going to happen. This is a methodology that if you walked into pretty much any religious education program or into any Catholic school for their religion class, you would find an updated version of what we see here. It would be in color. The textbooks would be newer, and the kids would look more contemporary, but the methodology is often the same. And I got to tell you, folks, I'm a big fan of textbooks. I work for a company that produces some of the best textbooks around. But we know when we produce those and show people how to use them, that the textbook is not the be-all and end-all of a religious formation session. It is, in and of itself, it is not going to give heartburn, right? So we have to use that textbook within a setting that sets hearts on fire. And that textbook is going to help us make sure that we are staying on target, that we are staying on message, that we are presenting the faith in its whole and its entirety and faithfully. But we have to surround it with a context that is going to be a context of encounter. And that's where I'd like to go next when I talk about how we have to view ourselves. Any catechist, any religion teacher, is not a teacher of a subject. Religion is not a subject that we are teaching, and that's not to say anything wrong about subjects, because that's, Catholic school teachers, you teach many, many subjects. But when it comes to your religion class, it's not just another subject. So what are we if we're not teachers of a subject? We are facilitators of an encounter. And this is so important for us to remember. We are, during the segment in which we are pulling out the religion book in a Catholic school or inviting children or adults into a faith formation program at the parish, we are facilitating an encounter with a living presence, Jesus Christ. He is alive, he is present, he is with us. And it's our job to invite Jesus in and to facilitate an encounter. I think one of the problems is that we sometimes invite Jesus in and we make him sit in the corner while we talk about him instead of truly encountering him. And so we're going to talk during this session about how do we facilitate an encounter? And how do you facilitate an encounter with mystery? Because Jesus' presence to us is mysterious. Even in a virtual world, we can see each other. So Andrea and I were chatting before this session began. Even in a virtual world, I can see Andrea. I can hear her voice. Jesus is present, but his presence is mysterious. It is not tangible the way that a human being is tangible. You can touch someone and feel them. You can hear their voice. You can see their face. So how do we facilitate an encounter with mystery? I'm going to touch on 6 areas during the time that we have. We're going to talk about the importance of storytelling, sacramentality, the passing on of tradition, spirituality and prayer, experiences of sharing God's mercy, and entering through their door. And that's another Ignatian phrase. St. Ignatius said, when you teach, be sure to enter through their door, but be sure to leave through your door. And I'm going to unpack that a little bit later on. It's a statement that really means many things. I'm going to focus it today on the area of technology, being the door of especially the young people that we're teaching. All right, so let's get into the first of these 6, storytelling. We need to remember that Jesus, his primary form of teaching was telling stories. And did he give sermons? Yes, we have the Sermon on the Mount, etc. We can think of those perhaps as lectures and so on. But his primary form of teaching was telling stories. And we have to be aware of the fact that stories are a vehicle for encountering and a vehicle for transcending. And certainly we are calling those we're teaching to transcend and to be able to connect with and touch the transcendent Christ. And so storytelling is a very important part of that. I want to touch on 3 areas of the storytelling that we do. The first area is Bible stories. Folks, we have got to be better at sharing Bible stories. And Bible stories should be a very important part of our faith formation setting. There is a story that we need to tell. There's a narrative that we need to pass on, the narrative of salvation history. And it is told primarily through stories. And so we need to become better storytellers, and we need to use tools that are available to us. One of the tools that I want to share with you is, you see on the page in front of you, this is a page from the Finding God, the new edition, the 2021 edition. And you see on the page that there is a QR code. And so anyone who is reading the textbook, the catechist, the teacher, the students, who has a cell phone or any device that can take a picture, can go, right to the QR code, and to be able to click on that, and it will pop up and take them to a story that will be told, and in a recording. And so this use of multimedia is so very important, and this is so great that our textbooks now are enabling us to get off the page and to tell a story, but say, okay, let's scan this code and hear a dramatic telling of the story, and that engages the imaginations of our young people. And so I'm so excited about that use of technology on the printed page. And I'm going to come back to this at the end. This is the door that we have to enter through. The door of technology is where we're going to find our young people, especially. The virtual world to them is not virtual. It's just another part of the world. I think it's just people my age and around my age who think, oh, this is virtual. This is not real. So that's the first thing that we need to focus on. Another form of the storytelling that we need to focus on is the stories of our saints. The saints are people who have amazing stories of their lives. And once again, you see there's a page from the Finding God. Every unit begins with a saint, and there's a QR code that takes you to a video. So in this particular chapter, we would watch a video about St. Ignatius. And that type of engagement, storytelling, needs to use every tool available, not just our own voice, not just the written printed page, but recordings and videos and so on. And the stories of saints are absolutely perfect for that. But one more thing I want to say about storytelling, and this I think is a product of the new evangelization. We've got to get better at telling our own stories. I don't think a lot of us are used to that as Catholics. And a lot of times when I share this with people, they say, what do you mean my story? I don't have a story. We need to reflect on that and recognize that all of us have a story. How have our lives been changed because of Jesus Christ? And even that question sometimes still stumps catechists and Catholic school teachers. They're like, what do you mean, how's my life changed because of Jesus Christ? And I often tell them, the first story you can tell is how you became a catechist or a Catholic school teacher, because if not for Jesus Christ, there is no reason to do either of those two things. So Jesus has changed your life simply by the fact that you are a catechist or you are a Catholic school teacher. So there's where your story starts. Start sharing these stories about how Jesus has changed your life, and how help our young people to recognize how they can also and must also learn to share stories about our faith, because that is one of the ways that we set hearts on fire. When someone shares a story of how the Lord has changed their life, boy, our hearts just perk up. We want to listen and go, really? That's amazing that that has happened to you. And then we dwell on, can that happen to me? Is that something that I always like to borrow the phrase, I want to have what you're having. When people hear us talk about our faith, they should look at us and say, I want what you're having. And I think one of the ways we do that is through stories. At any time, folks, feel free to write in a question or a comment, and we'll be sure to visit those at the end, or Andrea will interrupt me if a question comes up, and she might just say, hey, Joe, we got a question. You want to deal with this now? But I'd like to move on to the second characteristic or principle of reclaiming the fire, restarting this fire in people's hearts, and that is sacramentality. This is the heart of what it means to be Catholic. We are sacramental people, meaning that we use tangible signs and symbols to help us encounter the intangible God. And I direct your attention to on the screen, this is not a foreign concept to us. Every time we recite the creed, we say that we believe in God, the Father Almighty, who had created everything, including all things visible and invisible. Folks, as Catholics, we state every Sunday that we believe in invisible realities, God Himself being one of them. The invisible presence of Jesus Christ, the Holy Spirit, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And so we as Catholics have a language that we use to help us encounter this mysterious presence. And sacramentality is not some highfalutin theological concept. It's very, very human. Sacramental objects and actions are very human. You think of a child falls down and scrapes their elbow. You know, what do they do when they cry and they run to mommy or daddy? And what do they ask them to do? Kiss it and make it better. And if I was in person right now, I would ask everyone, raise your hand if you have ever kissed it and made it better. And almost every hand goes up, but then I immediately follow by saying, and how many of you believe it works? And every hand stays up. Because the symbolic action of kissing it and making it better transforms the child's reality, helps them to, transports them to another reality of comfort and security and so on. That's how symbolic actions work. And we as a church have all these symbolic objects and actions. And what I insist on is that they need to be a bigger part of our faith formation. They need to be a much bigger part. I say this quite often, that our catechesis, our faith formation should resemble the Mass more than class. There is an academic component to what we're teaching, and I'm going to touch on that in a second when I talk about tradition. But the context should feel less like school and more like church. So I have a diagram on the screen. You may want to do a print screen on this or take a picture of it because I'm going to race through these and share with you some of the different ways that we teach more sacramentally, okay? And so without further ado, the first one is going to be how do we as religion teachers use our space? How do we transform the space that we're in so that it feels more like an act of worship than another subject being taught? Do we transform the space with the objects that our church has, a Bible, a candle, holy water, a cloth to show the time of the year, the season of the year in the church year, and so on? The space itself teaches, and that is a sacramental language. So in addition to the space, using music and singing, how are we able to touch hearts in a way that goes beyond words? The church knows that one of the most powerful ways is through song. We go to church, and what's one of the first things we do is we sing, because music and singing touches our hearts. It gives us heartburn. It sets our hearts on fire when it's done well. And so music and singing needs to be a part of our faith formation. The next aspect is silence. Silence is God's primary language. And so we need to use the sacramental language of silence in our faith formation. Just inviting young people or adults that we're teaching to pause and to enter into silence and to know that God is encountered in silence. Another aspect of this language of mystery is storytelling, and I've already spent my first segment talking about that. Storytelling is a sacramental language. It's a symbolic language. We even use story. Jesus used parables. Those are not historical accounts. They are stories that transport us into another reality. And Jesus is always transporting us into another reality called the kingdom of God. You know, those parables are always the kingdom of heaven is like, or the kingdom of God is like. So we need to do that as well. Get rid of that and click on the next one is movement and gesture. When we go to Mass, look at how we use our bodies to pray. We walk in procession, we bow, we do a threefold sign of the cross on our forehead and our lips and our heart. We exchange a sign of peace during non-pandemic times, right? We dip our fingers into holy water and bless ourselves. We light candles. These are all things that we should be doing in our faith formation settings. You know, a Catholic school teacher, one of the best ways you can transition from teaching a subject to your religion session is to invite your students to come up and bless themselves with holy water, as though they're entering the church. That sign is a way of now you're entering into this sacred space, different from the other subjects that we're teaching, but an encounter with the divine. Another aspect is objects, signs, and symbols. We are a church that uses statues and crucifixes and candles and so many objects that we have. These are things that should be part of our faith formation as well, because they touch our hearts. Symbols stand for something and they speak to us at a deeper level. We also need to use ritual. Ritual is not to be confused with routine. Routine is something we do the same way all the time with no thinking. Ritual is something we do the same way all the time with deep thought. And so here's a picture of a catechist who has, I have the words that she uses every time she starts class. She greets her class and says, "This is the day the Lord has made." And she taught the students to respond, "Let us rejoice and be glad." This is a ritual that she does every class. This is how she announces that it's time for us to encounter Christ. Put your science book away or put your English book away. This is the day the Lord has made. And it's welcoming people, young people, into a celebration of God's presence. And then finally, it is works of mercy, engaging in service to others. And I'm going to spend, that's actually one of the 6 components. I'm going to revisit that in a second. But I want to move on now because our time is short and talk about another aspect of how we can reclaim this fire. And that is through the faithful and robust passing on of our tradition. I love to use that word robust. Bishop Barron refers to a phenomenon that he calls beige Catholicism, a presentation of Catholicism that is bland, that is, like the color beige. And he says that we have to have a robust presentation of our faith. Our tradition is rich. Our tradition has so much in it. A great example, I was attending an earlier presentation by Charlene Katra, sponsored by Loyola Press. And she's talking about children with attention deficit. And she was talking about different tools and strategies that you can put into the hands of children who need something to grab onto. And she had a number of examples, but the most interesting was what she said, the rosary. The rosary is something that can be put in the hands of children with ADD and give them something to hold on to. That's a rich part of our tradition. That's what I mean by a robust presentation, that the rosary is not old-fashioned, it's part of our tradition. And we pass that on to people. And so we need to remember that we have a concrete story to pass on. Our God has revealed himself to us in concrete ways, concrete actions, concrete words. So we're not just preaching about some nebulous God who is like a vapor of happy thought. We are passing on a God who has revealed himself to us in history, in actions, and in words. And we have to teach that robustly. Our young people, our adults should be able to summarize the narrative of our faith. And you might think, how do you summarize the entire faith of our salvation history? 3 words: rescue, restoration, and reassurance. The entire story of our salvation history is about how God rescues his people, restores his people, and reassures them that he is with us always. But we need to teach the particulars. What are examples of God rescuing his people? The Exodus story, the exile story, the return from exile, of course, the story of Jesus Christ. We need to teach this tradition robustly. We need for our young people and our adults to be able to talk about their faith. Do not be afraid in faith formation settings to do assessments. As much as I say it should resemble the mass more than class, I give quizzes when I teach. I give tests. I give assessments. I want to know, do the students in front of me, can they talk about their faith? Are they comprehending the stories of our tradition? And can they share that with others? Because if we're going to evangelize the world, we've got to be able to talk about our faith. So this is an example of an assessment, once again, from the Finding God program that I'm borrowing from. I work for Loyola Press, and I've helped develop the Finding God program. So all my examples are coming from that. And you can find a link to the Finding God program both in the documents that I have for you to download, as well as in the chat. I started by putting a bunch of links in there. All right, let's move on. Time is short. Much to say yet. I got a lot more heartburn to give. Oh, one more thing for the assessment. That can be done in fun ways too. We have games nowadays. Our publishers provide as many activities online. Loyola Press provides the Fishers of Faith, a great opportunity for young people to review the content of their faith, but have fun while they're doing it, to feel engaged at the same time. All right. Spirituality and prayer. We need to facilitate encounters. What does that mean for our faith formation settings? It means that it must have a climate of prayer, that we must have time in which we stop talking about Jesus and we spend time talking with Jesus. And I love this picture because St. Ignatius said that prayer should resemble one friend speaking to another. Folks, when I say that you are the facilitator of an encounter with Jesus, this is the image I want you to remember. I want you to imagine, how can you, as a religion teacher, as a catechist, help your students to feel like Jesus is sitting right next to them and they can talk to him? And one of the profound ways that we do that is through what we call reflective prayer. This is very Ignatian. It's a big part of our Finding God program, that we invite those we're teaching to close their eyes, to imagine a place where they encounter Jesus, and then we prompt them to talk to Jesus and to listen to Jesus. And I have to tell you, as a catechist, as a former Catholic school teacher, these are some of the most fulfilling moments I have ever had in teaching the faith, is when I lead young people into a quiet space where they talk with Jesus, and my mouth eventually zips shut, and I'm just walking around the room and watching young people with their eyes closed, their heads bowed, talking with Jesus. I feel like I have accomplished the task of facilitating an encounter. And those are the moments when I feel like this is why I became a catechist. All right. We need one of the most powerful ways we can set hearts on fire is by engaging people, children, youth, and adults in experiences of sharing God's mercy. In the letter of James, James said that faith without works is dead. Faith formation without works of service, without works of mercy, is dead. And we need to get out of our classrooms occasionally and engage in service, or bring service experiences into the classroom, like inviting students to create care packages for the homeless in that setting. You know, we can't take first graders out to a homeless shelter. They're not old enough. But can we engage them in sharing God's mercy? This is a picture of me, and my wife is in the background there too, with some sixth graders that I was a catechist for. And one week we arranged to take them out to a Ronald McDonald House where they served meals for the guests there. And long story short, at the end of the year, when I asked the young people what their favorite experience was during the whole year of religious education, was it Mr. Paprocki's classes, his PowerPoint presentations, his fun activities, the fun games, even the great reflective prayers? Every child that you see in that picture, which was my whole class, every one of them said their favorite experience was doing service for other people. And so if we are going to touch the hearts of those that we are teaching, we've got to get them out and actually serving others. I grew up, I was taught how to memorize the corporal works of mercy. I was never encouraged to practice them, just memorize them to pass a quiz. We've got to get them out into the world doing corporal and spiritual works of mercy. And finally, my friends, we need to enter through their door. If we are teaching religion the way this picture is showing, we are not entering their door, because our young people are definitely, whoops, I lost my picture, there we go. Our young people that we are teaching are digital natives. Technology is part of their world. They expect technology to pop up in almost any experience that they are a part of. I'm not saying that we should become slaves to technology, but we need to integrate it into our faith formation settings. And so, you know, as I mentioned, using those QR codes that are a part of the Finding God 2021 edition is one of the ways that young people are going to recognize faith formation as being relevant. The new directory for catechesis has a whole section about technology, and it says that unless we incorporate technology into our proclamation of the faith, we run the risk of being seen as irrelevant. Young people, if they do not see a gadget, you know, a phone, a little device for a Bluetooth device for playing music on, and so on, my headphones, the microphones, if they don't see these things ever being a part of religion, in their mind they think this is irrelevant because my world involves all these devices and all these other things as a reality. We may not like that, but it is the reality we teach, and we need to enter into their world and lead them beyond the gadgets to the real presence of Christ. I was talking with a catechist the other day who the group of catechists I was with was lamenting this catechesis that we do virtually. And this catechist said, oh no, I led some of my students on a guided reflection, and when I was done in a virtual setting, when I was done, I asked them to react to it, and one of the boys, a seventh grade boy, said, hey, you know what? That's the first time God was ever in my room at home. Technology can lead others to encounter the reality of Christ. All right, I'm trying to skip to the next slide. And I seem to be a little frozen right now. I'm not sure why that has happened.
Okay, well,
So
I'll pose a question if you want to stop share
thank
and
you,
reshare.
Andrea.
Maybe that'll help. So
Yeah.
you had mentioned about storytelling as being so important and technology. How do you feel like digital storytelling or storytelling using technology kind of changes what that's like for a catechist or an instructor?
Um, I think of it as a supplement, a complement to what we do. I would hope that catechists, religion teachers, can become good storytellers in and of ourselves. But again, some of us don't have that charism. And so that doesn't make us boring, but it makes the methodology boring. That's why you can use a digital presentation to say that I'm not the best storyteller, but by golly, I've got this recording that I can play that's going to wow you. So let's listen to the story. So I think that there's always opportunities for us to look at what can I do myself live and in person using my own charism, but what are ways that technology can enhance? Another great example, Andrea, for myself, speaking personally, I can play guitar and I used to sing. I say in the past, used to sing because over the years I've had some hearing problems and I'm a little tone deaf now. I can't carry a melody as well as I used to. So I'm not going to sing in front of a class anymore. I used to do that all the time. I'm going to bring in a recording. I'm going to bring in my phone and my little speaker. I'm going to do that QR code that's going to take me to a song that's embedded in the program. And I'm going to blast that speaker and have music in my classroom. But it's not going to be me because I will give the bad kind of heartburn if they hear me singing, if you know what I mean. So anything else, Andrea? I'm just checking my screen again. It just seems like my PowerPoint is frozen, but
Yeah,
I'm at the end.
if you wanna hit stop share and reshare, you might want to try that. But
Okay, let me try
um,
that. So stop
and
share.
I'll keep chattering while you're doing that. I
Please
think
do.
it's really important, that you, as you pointed out, that people have different gifts, and I often, where people sort of have a hesitancy with technology is a fear of losing the person of the catechist. And as you
Right.
mentioned, if you're great at storytelling, don't use the video, use your storytelling and
Exactly.
supplement. So do you have any sort of I'm sure you've heard that too, people sort of concerned that technology is replacing the humanity. Can you speak to that a little bit?
I'm very concerned about that. And that's one of the reasons that I'm so proud of Loyola Press is that we continue to say that the most important aspect of faith formation is the person of the catechist. There are other outfits that are creating technology that is trying to replace the catechist. And I bristle at that when I see a program come out that tells a parish, all you need is this DVD and someone to press play. You don't need a catechist anymore. You don't need someone because the person on the disc or on the streaming video is the one who's going to touch their hearts. I'm sorry, but that's not where we need to go. We are not going to replace, and I will fight till the bitter end on this, Andrea. And thanks for asking such an important question. I am the champion of catechists, and I will do everything I can to help catechists be the most important aspect in that room because we encounter God through other people. And a video can embellish that. A recording can embellish that. It can even set our hearts on fire, but you can't ask a video a question. You can't
Mm-hmm.
ask a recording to tell you a story. You can't ask a recorded presence or share something intimate with a recorded presence. So that's a very important distinction you bring up, Andrea, and it's so important for us to hang on to that. Nothing replaces the catechist, which is why I saved this aspect for last. And I started with the storytelling and telling people, tell your own story, because that's going to make the biggest impact on people.
I think that's so important because you hear these fantastic stories that people have, or these very moving stories, or things that are on stories of saints or on television or movies, And, those maybe more, I don't want to say ordinary because none of them are ordinary, they're all unique, but those ordinary stories often, I think, humanize, why we've come to faith. It's usually a person. Someone inspired me to do this, or this person always took me to
Yeah.
mass, or I remember this experience. So I think that storytelling part and that humanity is so important. But how do you get people sort of comfortable? How would you advise catechists getting more comfortable expressing their stories in different ways? So certainly standing in front of a group and telling a story, where some of us are used to that. But if they're having to use different
Yeah.
mediums, what would
Hmm.
you advise for someone who has a little nervousness about getting started in that space?
Very good, Andrew. First of all, we have a right to privacy, and I'm not suggesting that you have to stand up there and
Hmm.
and share all the
Hmm.
skeletons in your closet. That's inappropriate sharing. But can we give a glimpse into our experiences? One of the areas that I like to start with is telling them stories of things I said and did when I was their age that I'm not proud of. And so I remember in a class on morality, we were talking about honesty, the eighth commandment, it shall not bear false witness. And I told the kids a story about how when I was in the eighth grade, I was part of a little group that um, uh, did something wrong. And the teacher found out about it and asked each of us individually what we knew about it. And I said, "Oh, sister, I don't know anything." And I lied to her, and because I was afraid of getting, having my friends, think less of me. And I said, I'm not, and the kids that I was teaching said, "You did that?" I said, "Yes, and I'm not proud of it."
I can't
I
imagine
think
you
I,
doing that either, Joe.
well, that's my point is they think we're all saints. The kids we teach, they think we've never gone through anything. We haven't dealt with the issues they deal with. I think a good place to start is share your struggles, share moments when you felt peer pressure, share moments when you did something that, again, nothing that's earth shattering, but that you're not
Mhm.
that proud of and you learned from it. I think that can be a way to help people start to feel more relaxed about telling stories.
Yeah, show that humanity we're trying to hold on to. Very
Exactly.
much. I could
Exactly.
talk to you all day, but I have to jump into the
Likewise.
next session. So you can stay here and chat with Joe, connect with him through the People tab. Joe, are you going to go over to the Loyola booth anymore today?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay, so
Hmm.
find him there, and I'm going to prep for the next session. But feel free to stay here in the chat. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Andrea, so much as well. Thanks for helping me along. And thank you, everyone, for being a part of this. God bless.